Clock's a little behind there. As a result of that, we'll go ahead and call our meeting to order and begin our meeting as always with the invocation led by Commissioner Rushing.
Join me if you like. Heavenly Father, we thank you for bringing us here safely tonight to conduct people's business. We thank you for allowing us to live in a country where we have the freedom to have our elections and choose our leadership in this country. We thank you for all the great servicemen that we have. We thank you for all the great firefighters and police officers, sheriff's deputies, EMS, and emergency personnel. And we hope that you would be with us as we journey home tonight. In your name we pray. Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We have a number of public hearings this evening, so we will begin with Charlotte Pipe and Foundry.
Mail is here to give you a brief overview.
Chairman Simpson, Commissioners, Manager Cotto, it's my pleasure to bring before you tonight the Economic Development Incentive Grant request by Charlotte Pipe and Foundry Company, previously referred to as Project Flow. Charlotte Pipe and Foundry, headquartered in Uptown Charlotte, has operated their plastics division in Monroe since the 1960s. Their campus on Old Charlotte Highway and Airport Road occupies more than 1 million square feet of manufacturing space, where they employ approximately 550 people. The company produces PVC drain, waste, and ventilation pipe used extensively in new residential and commercial construction. In fact, the Monroe facility produces over 200 miles of plastic pipe each day. Now that's enough pipe to run a straight line from Union County to Savannah, Georgia, or enough to circle the earth with 4 months worth of production. So it's a great deal of pipe every day. The company is considering its Union County location for an expansion project totaling approximately $22,031,000 and the creation of 5 to 10 new jobs paying an average of $45,000 per year. The project involves the purchase and installation of state-of-the-art production equipment and improvements to related structures. This new equipment will greatly enhance the company's ability to compete in their market sector. And the company has indicated that incentives are a very important factor for the project. And the project is in competition with other corporate locations in Texas and Florida. So tonight we're requesting your consideration of a Step 3 Economic Development Incentive Grant in an amount not to exceed $605,852, paid over 5 years beginning in fiscal year 2021. The grant will be based upon the Union County Tax Office's appraised value each year on the company's anticipated investment of $22,031,000 in new equipment and building improvements. Based on this investment and holding all other factors constant, including depreciation, the company would pay estimated ad valorem taxes on the new taxable investment of $860,310 over the same grant period. Of course, actual tax revenue to the county will be based on the current tax rate applied to the assessed value of the investment each year after depreciation. As we do with all of our projects, we performed a cost-benefit analysis, and this project shows a 1.54 to 1 return over the first 5 years of the project, or the grant period, and that increases to 11.89 to 1 return over the life of the project. We presented this project to the Monroe Union County Economic Development Board of Advisors at their April 10th meeting, where they unanimously recommended that we bring this project to you this evening for your consideration. We also brought the project to the Monroe City Council last week at their May 1st meeting, where a similar economic development grant was awarded. Therefore, the Monroe Union County Economic Development Board of Advisors and staff recommend the award of this Step 3 performance-based economic development incentive grant to Charlotte Pipe and Foundry in an amount not to exceed $605,852 to help secure this $22 million investment. At this time, I'd like to recognize Ms. Lois Warren, who's controller with Charlotte Pipe and Foundry, And Ms. Warren is available to answer any questions that you might have. And with that, I thank you.
Questions? Thank you, Ron. This time we'll open the public hearing, and we have no one signed up to speak, so we will close the public hearing. Takes us to item 4, Weeks Retail.
Mr. Matthews will give you an overview of this request prior to you taking public comments.
Good evening, Commissioners, the manager. What you have here tonight is a conditional zoning request. Property is located on Providence Road, Highway 16, just to the north of Newtown Road. You've had several of these along Highway 16 recently, so this is another one in the line there. This property is requested to be rezoned from R4, which is residential, R40 residential, 40,000 square foot lots, to conditional zoning B2, that is a light commercial district. The applicant has requested a conditional zoning so that they can limit some of the uses that would be allowed on the property. And they've also provide a detailed site plan and some elevations of the property. These are just some photographs of the property and what is adjacent and nearby. There is a home existing on the property. It is also adjacent to neighborhoods in the area. And then across the street, this is a produce stand that's across the street from the property in the area. Highway 16 is due to be widened. However, the time frame is not defined at this point in time, but within the next several years, it is due to be widened to, I believe, a 4-lane cross-section. Just to give you an idea of where the site is here. This is Victoria Lake Drive. That's a subdivision here. There's another subdivision just below this. Recently, you had some rezonings that were in this area here. Again, the mix of uses in there are currently residential with commercial at the node here at the intersection of Newtown and Providence Road. That's just the zoning in the area is currently mostly residential in the area, with the exception of this area here. There was a rezoning to commercial just below here. It just hasn't been reflected on the map at this point in time. So this is the aerial view of the property. It is 1.5 acres in size. However, with the widening of the road and the dedication of right-of-way, it is likely to be reduced. The applicant has agreed to dedicate right-of-way for this project. And if doing so and that project is widened sort of symmetrically, then it is likely to reduce the size to about an acre in total size of the property. Again, this is the location. It is in between two subdivisions along Providence Road. I wanted to show you a site plan for the project as well as some elevations. This is an elevation just showing you one side of the building. It actually is two buildings. So this is a 5,100 square foot building here. This is a 3,000 square foot building. Total project is about 8,100 square feet. Again, it's meant to have more of a residential feel, as if you can look at the building elevations, that is meant to look more residential in character. That has a barn feel on the one side as you face the roadway. And then this is another side from the parking area. Again, these are all part of the conceptual plan that was submitted, and the applicant would then be tied to these elevations and the site plan if it were to be approved by the board. Site plan is just very general. Your building location here, this is the 5,100 square foot building. This is the 3,000 square foot building. Parking to the side, landscaping to meet an S2 screening on the back side of the property. Again, because it would be zoned B2 if it's approved, there are some screening requirements they'd have to meet. The applicant has indicated that they will meet the lighting standards of the ordinance, which require that lighting must be downward and no more than a half a foot candle can actually go beyond the property lines. They've indicated they'll meet that. And uses have been limited to retail, personal improvement services, and eating establishments. I believe that was originally discussed. I think the applicant has asked to include some minor office uses on that as well. Again, it is not a full list of B2 uses. There are limited uses for B2 that the applicant is requesting. The applicant is here and would certainly give a presentation to the board. I do want to make the board aware that their planning board met. They heard this matter. They did vote. It was a 3-2 vote in favor. However, that vote is a little different in that one of the board members did not recuse themselves. They did not vote. Because they did not vote, that vote was counted as affirmative for the motion, and the motion was to approve it. So it was a 3-2 vote in favor, but one member did abstain from voting, and their vote counted as the third vote in favor of that. So I need to make you aware of that, what occurred on that particular project. I'll be happy to answer any questions you might have, but I do know the applicant is here and they might like to speak to the board.
Questions from the board? I have one, Brian.
Yes, sir.
You have a picture of the overlay of the commercial district as it relates to, or commercial center as we call it there at the intersection, and where that property lays with regard to that?
Have that in here. I'm not sure why that's not showing up. Let me see if I can find that. So, you can see here, and I'm sorry, I'm just, if I can kind of reduce this in size. What you've got here is this is the commercial district down in the lower section. That is that node there. It is at the intersection of Newtown and Providence Road. It's approximately a 1/4 mile in radius. This property is just above that. It is probably a good, I would say maybe 500-600 feet or more beyond the actual location of where this circle is. That's a good point, and I'm glad you brought that up. This area is designated as single-family residential in our land use plan. However, our land use plan does indicate that in the single-family residential districts, that low-density commercial is and can be appropriate in that area. We did look at this at the staff level, and we do feel that this is considered low density as far as the commercial activity. And so as far as the plan is concerned, we believe that it is consistent with that component of the plan, meaning that even though it's in single-family residential, that does allow for some low-density commercial. However, it is not inside of that node, which is defined as a neighborhood center for that area. That answer your question, sir?
It does, yes. Commissioner Helms has a question.
Yes, Brian, can you tell us, it was a 3-2 vote or a 2-2 vote?
It was 2-2 with one member who abstained.
But what was the dissenting factors in that?
Dissenting factors were that, number one, the board felt that the widening of 16 would have some concerns as far as that would go. Also, they felt that it was outside of this commercial node, and while that single family is allowed, commercial is allowed in single family, they did not feel that that was the appropriate location for it.
Mr. Rushing?
Can you show a picture of what's there now again?
The actual aerial photo? Okay. Yeah. So there's the aerial photo. It's not the best in the world. What you've got here is a house on this location. You've got homes that sort of surround it in this area here, and then this is Victoria Lake Drive. This is common area for Victoria Lake, so that's owned by the subdivision. And then across the street is where the Providence Produce stand is located.
What kind of effect, maybe the owners may answer this better, what kind of effect would the road widening have?
I'll let them answer it in detail. We did discuss this with DOT. The applicant is actually making some improvements as far as right in, right out on their property. They're having to actually restrict their access as far as the property goes. And then when the road is formally widened, at that point in time, there'll be of course, a different feel to it, but it's likely it will still be right in, right out at that point. But I know the applicant can give you greater detail. As far as limiting the property goes, they'll lose about, I think, 20 to 30 more feet along their right-of-way, but it will reduce them to approximately 1 acre in size as far as development potential. Currently, 1.5 acres would lower them to about 1 acre as far as development.
Will it have an effect on the existing home there?
The existing home?
Is there existing home there?
I don't believe that it would be affected. I think it's far enough off the road that if the road was widening, I don't believe that the structure itself would have to be removed.
Mr. Hale?
Is this current structure gonna be removed to build the new?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Thank you, Brian.
Yes, sir.
We get the lights back up.
My name is Wendy Weeks. I'm the property owner.
Thank you.
Hi. Thank you for hearing about our proposal. I have not prepared a formal presentation for you. As Brian has said, I've owned this property for about 10 years, and it's a 70s model vintage brick ranch. And there's been significant commercial interest, and the situations allowed me the freedom of time to try and plan something that I thought would be an asset to the area and not what I call mind-numbing commercial. I made it pleasant to look at from all sides. There's no backside commercial that's mechanical. I put a mechanical utility alleyway between the two buildings, so everything mechanical will be contained within there behind a fence, discreetly screened. I think it's an asset to the Waxhaw community to have that rural feel maintained. I simply have the intention of making the property up to date. I can rent it, but there's significant interest. So, is there anything in particular you would like to know? For me, there are no homes, and the HOA president from Chatsworth would disagree, but the property is on the front sides, HOA community property on both sides of mine, and then the property behind mine are undeveloped. And I propose that they are undeveloped because the owners are full aware that whatever goes on this property will affect what will go behind it, and that the effect of it developed will have, once it's developed, will have much less of a negative impact.
Mr. Helms?
Yes, sir. How many units do you anticipate to have in this particular 8,100 square feet?
A minimum of 2, a maximum of 4.
Okay.
Currently, I have non-binding LOIs for 3. The barn unit is committed by a CrossFit, and the stone structure, 2/3 of it is requested by a salon, and 1/3 of it by a Smoothie King, Jamba Juice type facility.
Thank you.
Yes, sir. Any other questions?
Thank you.
Thank you.
We will open the public hearing. We have no one to sign up, so we will, we do? Oh, gosh, we do. Robert Consoli, I'm sorry. About to miss you.
You've seen me before.
About to miss you.
Hopefully you won't see me again. Commissioners, ladies, I'll try to make this short. We've gone down this road many times. My name's Bob Consoli. I'm president of the HOA for Chatsworth Subdivision. I represent 37 tax-paying households or landowners. They're all very upset with the commissioners on the last two decisions that were made, which could possibly devalue our property. There's no way to know until it happens. We'll all know if it does happen. I don't see any benefits of what was done in the past with the Truffle Plaza, nor do we see any benefits that happened with the Correa property. Now, this presentation that Brian just put on, I'm glad, I couldn't see because of the darkness, but I'm glad somebody brought up. This is clearly outside the community center, which has been like the thrust of all this emphasis on the other two properties. It's clearly outside. And one very important fact that Mr. Matthews forgot to mention, the planning board, the two members of the planning board, I think one was Duggan, I can't remember the other fellow's name, their biggest concern was traffic. That's no big surprise on Providence Road, traffic. And having a right in and a right out for who knows how many years until the road is widened is gonna be a detriment to everybody. There's gonna be, I mean, we have accidents there as it is now. There'll be more accidents. There's, plus, also, I think Brian mentioned this is, I don't know his definition of, Brian, what is your definition of low volume?
We define that as anything that's usually less than 2,000 square feet.
Oh, but I can assure you that it's high volume as far as footprints or traffic. I don't know exactly, because I think the plat has changed a little bit. There's about, what do you got, 40, 45 parking spots? Somewhere around there. So, I don't know if anybody belongs to a fitness club, but this fitness club opens up early, and there's people coming in and out throughout the day. Plus, anything that's gonna be retail there, there'll be people coming in and out during the day. Well, you're gonna add this traffic to Providence Road. Again, it's right in, right out. Now, I don't know why somebody, or no one's here from Victoria Lake, but we're very concerned from another standpoint. Our children, our bus, the school buses, because until Providence Road is widened, anybody that comes here and wants to go back to, or wants to go back towards the Charlotte area is gonna have to use our property to turn around. They'll use our property and they'll use the property of Victoria Lake as a turnaround if they wanna go to Charlotte, or if they wanna, or if they're coming from Charlotte, I'm sorry. Coming from Charlotte, they can't turn in there, they can't make a left-hand turn. So the only way they can do it is they can go down to Newtown, which only creates a little hazard there, but they'll learn, because they do it now already. They'll come in Chatsworth, make a U-turn in the front of our property, and then come back. People going the opposite way will do the same thing. Once the road is widened, I mean, no one can really say how much of this property is gonna be eaten up, because, matter of fact, you gentlemen are well aware, the road's gonna be 2 lanes each way, and on each side is gonna be sidewalk, and on each side is gonna be bicycle lanes. So that's gonna be fairly wide. So it's gonna eat into that property. I can't tell you if it's gonna take up more parking spots or not. With the traffic and the volume of cars going in there, during the day, you got traffic problems on Providence. In the evening, especially in the wintertime, you're gonna have a lot of headlights shooting into our subdivision. This will affect, there's 11 homes that will see this property. Now, I don't know what has to, once they develop it, what's gonna get torn down. There are some trees there, but there's not a lot of trees. And some of it's fairly bare. So you may see, there'll be a lot of traffic or headlights going out into the property. That's another concern. The lighting going down, I think that'll be okay. I mean, if they wanted to do this, I would say if they put a berm, you know, 6-foot berm, that would prevent headlights from going into our property. None of the people that live in the area in which this property is being done or proposed are happy with this at all. These are all taxpayers. And the other thing, I mean, just personally, this almost seems like a bailout. I mean, there's a house there. Somebody bought a house years ago. Whether they live there, whether they rent it, that's their property. for them to say, oh, I'm not doing that well with this, so I want to turn it into a commercial piece of property, which is outside the the community area, I think is a disservice to the people of Chatsworth and a disservice to the people of Victoria Lake. So I would hope that you gentlemen would vote this down. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Now we'll close the public hearing. My apologies. Before we go to the next item, I have one question, point of order for Jeff. I notice it says on here to approve or to deny. Do we don't take that up now, but we can place it on our agenda? Is that the intent? Yes, okay, good deal. That takes us to item 5, which is Rayfield.
Mr. Matthews?
So this particular project, this is coming back to you. So originally, this was a project that came to you on Ray Road near Tom Short for a PUD amendment to the PUD 6 out in that area, as well as a conditional rezoning. And the original request, which was approved, was to allow for 35,000 square feet of office and retail on the site. There were some conditions, and one of the conditions that was established was to limit the amount of office to a total of 15,000 square feet. The applicant has come back and requested if that number could be adjusted from a total of 15,000 square feet to a total of 20,000 square feet. It's our understanding that they have some potential tenants that are interested in it, and they would be able to market it better if they were allowed to have a little bit more office space in here. So what you really have here this evening is an amendment to an existing PUD, as well as conditional rezoning to allow for the project to have 20,000 square feet of office maximum. It would not increase the total size of the project. It would still remain at 35,000 square feet for office and retail. Now, the applicant is here. This is consistent with our land use plan. Again, Ray Road is a commercial corridor, so staff does recommend in favor of this. Planning board did hear this, and a 5-0 vote in favor of this request. I do believe the applicant's here. They may have some more information for you, and I'll be happy to answer any questions you might have.
All right.
Very good, thank you.
Questions for the applicant? Anybody? No? Thank you. You'd like to speak?
Yes.
Good evening, members of the board. My name is Brian Smith. I'm here representing the petitioner, and I don't have a formal presentation, but just was here to answer any questions if you did have any, and to also request that vote tonight if the board sees fit.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We will open the public hearing. We had no one signed up to speak for this one, so we will close the public hearing. That takes us to our informal comments. And we have one individual signed up to speak, Dr. David Cook.
Good afternoon, gentlemen. I'm standing here in front of you again. The last time I was here, we had discussed the policies that were in place for the Ag Center and public programming for ours. It was our understanding that the county commissioners had informed Ms. Cotto and Mr. Caton to leave our contracts exactly the way they were so that it wouldn't cause us any problems with any of our sponsors or anything like that. That has not happened. We were enforced that we would have to give a 50% deposit, in which I had to pay that out of my own pocket because our funding doesn't come in until the budget year for the municipalities and everything. But I bring to your attention, I got this email the other day, and in which Mr. Caton took it upon himself to call the city to inquire about our funding. We don't know why he wouldn't answer my email. But anyway, this young lady sent us an email telling us that if we want to reserve our dates for 2019, we have to do it now. And as soon as we do it, they will look at the dates, and within 14 days, they will make a response, and we have to then submit our application, sign it, and then at that point, we have to give a 50% deposit again. We are a nonprofit, and we do not have this money until the city or the municipalities who fund us give us that funding. We wouldn't receive our funding for this program until June or July of 2019. This was the one problem that we had before, in which I came to you to get resolution on. This is a part of the policy, and they are still trying to enforce this upon us. And it's not only us, it's any nonprofit that relies on funding that comes in from anywhere that does a budget year. I'm asking that this be put on the agenda tonight to be talked about and voted on, so that we know how that we can move forward. Because if not, we're going to have to start looking for other venues, and we don't want to remove this from Union County, because it's a beautiful program for Union County. It helps 600 of our kids, and it just seems like when we get one thing done, it's another one ends. They've enforced now the catering thing, so now we're teetering on losing our sponsor, which this board said for them not to do, so that we did not lose any of our sponsors, to not cause us this problem, and they're still enforcing it. I don't know what else to do. I feel like I'm just running and I'm hitting a wall, and all I'm trying to do is help our community. So if somebody could just, move this to an action item, I'd appreciate it.
Thank you. That was all of our informal comments. Time for additions, deletions, and adoption of the agenda. I'll start off with, what I'd like to do is move item 24 to 23. That's the economic step grant for Charlotte Pike. And then we'll move 23 to 23A. That'll speed up the process, I think.
Motion to approve the agenda as amended.
We have a motion, any discussion? All in favor say aye. Motion to approve consent. All in favor say aye. Aye. Thank you. That will take us to item 23, old business.
The commissioners heard a presentation from Ron Mail with Monroe Union County Economic Development, and if you have any questions of Mr. Mail and Mr. Platay.
Questions? How about a motion?
Motion that we approve the step 3 economic development incentive grant award to Charlotte Pipe Foundry. Project flow in amount not to exceed $605,852 over a 5-year period. Authorize the county manager to approve an incentive grant agreement with the company pending legal review.
Have a motion, any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye. Aye. Unopposed. We're grateful to Charlotte Pike and Foundry for their continued commitment to Union County. Look forward to working with you. Thank you. That takes us to 23A, which was 24.
Yes, Commissioners. On October 31st, 2017, the board held a special meeting facilitated by Ed Gagnon in which guidance was provided to staff relating to budget development and those topics and objectives that were to be addressed as part of the process. One of the objectives was the development of a capital improvement plan with an associated funding strategy. On March 26th, the board held a special meeting in which all capital projects were presented, and the board ranked the projects based upon their individual priorities. This information was used to develop a proposed funding strategy, which was presented to the board on April 16th. The strategy included debt service savings, a committed penny, 911 funds, fund balance, interfund borrowing, and other debt funding. At that time, the board was apprised that a decision needed to be made in order for the manager to finalize the budget. This evening, the plan is being presented to the board again seeking direction in order that I, as your manager, can meet my statutory requirements of submitting a balanced budget by June 1. I would note that the plan has had one adjustment in the area from your April 16th discussion in the area of the Board of Elections. Based upon the discussion that took place on April 16th, we have added $100,000 in next year's funding strategy to do a study regarding the storage needs of the Board of Elections. And we have moved the renovation of their existing facility from 2023-24 to 2020 and 21. I will now turn the presentation over to Mr. Yates.
Thank you, Ms. Cook. Good evening, Commissioners. You should have at your seat a copy of this presentation, and as was mentioned, this is a refresh of what we put together for the 16th of April based on the direction received on March 26th and originally on October 31st last year during your strategic planning session. So I'll hit a couple of the highlights for you on the funding strategy, and then we'll just take questions. A couple of the key components that you're considering will be the committing the debt service savings. So this funding stream, what that does is it takes our buy down, or as we pay down our debt service, and redirects, instead of allowing that savings to roll back to operating, move it to the capital funding to create a sustainable ongoing funding stream. Also in that same vein, we have put a committed penny from the operations and put that into the capital program to be able to fund ongoing capital. You see some asset forfeiture funds. Those are specifically tied to the sheriff's firing range. Pretty healthy fund balance usage. We heard loud and clear that you as a board wanted us to maximize our fund to balance usage, and we've done that by leveraging that against the other funding sources. Some general fund pay-go, interfund borrowing, which is a cash flow mechanism to allow us to be able to build these projects in a timely manner. And then also the other large component is a use of other, we're referring to as other debt funding of about $10 million, and that's being used in this plan for the sheriff's office building. It's a little less than half of what that cost of that project is. And we have other debt funding because at this time we don't know what that tool will be. There's a lot of tools at our disposal concerning debt, but as we get close to having to issue that, we'll come back with a recommendation. And there's also $3.7 million of funds that will roll forward from other projects that will be closed toward the end of this year that'll allow us to maximize the savings on other projects. And I'll note that $10 million is feasible to fund out of your debt funding stream, your debt funds that you have without a change to that tax rate. If you remember back to our funding plan for that, the 3.09 cents were put into place with a plan on assessed value as well as issuance cost. What we found is the market was really friendly to us in October, as well as our ad valorem values are increasing. So we believe we can absorb that $10 million without having to increase that rate, and we can continue to reduce it over time and absorb that $10 million. It's roughly about $800,000, give or take, each year. So the projects, as Cindy mentioned, the Board of Elections renovations is the only change to that project package that we showed you on the 16th. $100,000 in next year, and then we move the construction to 2020 and 2021. And we'll try to, in that process, we would try to work with the Board of Elections to ensure that they're not disrupted during the presidential election year. I know that was at least one concern voiced to me. So that's kind of part of the thinking behind how that's scheduled. So with that, again, we're looking for approval of the 6-year general fund capital plan and associated funding strategy. And as Cindy mentioned, time is starting to run short. So any direction or a decision will help us finish out the budgeting process. I know we'll be in front of you on Friday with a preliminary look at operating. And as you can see with that dedicated penny and that debt savings commitment, this will have a significant impact on operations and the operating budget one way or the other based on your direction. So with that, I'll give it back to you for questions and we'll look for direction.
Commissioner Helms?
Yeah, looking at sheriff's facility, you had total up to about $23 million ballpark overall. Now, what I'm having trouble understanding, I've talked to the sheriff over months, and he's looking for administrative offices. We just built a DHS building. It is huge. We built it and furnished it for $40 million. How you gonna spend $20 million down there?
It's about 26 million.
Okay.
And it's based on the latest analysis. If you remember, we did a space needs analysis and some preliminary work with some architects to get to a cost per square foot, an estimated cost per square foot. So that estimate is based on the latest market trends as well as some inflation assumptions. As you can see in this plan, the construction doesn't actually occur until 2020 or a little bit later than that. So with the market tightening and with construction costs going up, I don't think it's unrealistic to expect that that project will be in that $26 million range, if not maybe a little more.
And
Just administrative offices.
Yes.
Last I heard, it was targeted $200 a square foot for administrative offices, and if you did a harden, because we were talking about our urgent need for 911 facilities, and that was in the neighborhood of $400 a square foot. Is that correct?
Well, and keeping in mind that the 911 centers are going to be the most expensive space you can build, given the electronics, the wiring, the HVAC, and so forth. So, office space, Class B office space is a little different. Again, this is based on current working estimates from the latest study and the latest estimates provided by an architect and through that needs analysis.
And the consultant recommended that the 911 center not be joined with this particular facility because of uses of space. So
I understand. I'm not arguing that.
Okay.
I think it should be a separate facility, but it looks like the sheriff's office is falling behind the 4-H pavilion in urgency. And when we ranked on category. We didn't rank overall, but now we've got an overall ranking, which I don't think it puts wants ahead of needs of the county.
Well, are you referring to the numbering?
Yeah.
That numbering is for identification purposes.
Okay, that's not a ranking.
No, it's not a ranking. It's the funding strategy. If you'll look at the proposed 2019, that would be primarily design work. And for a building that size, you're going to look at probably a year-long process to select an architect, and depending upon your build method and so forth. So this project, as far as projects go, if you adopted this plan tonight, the sheriff's office facility would be right on track with what you would expect it to be. If you remember back when we did the human services building, it kind of had the same arc, the design process, land, grading and everything, and then you had the construction, and then you had the final opening and FF&E. And if you look at that project, you have the design work, the preliminary stuff, then you get into the construction, and it's probably a year-long construction, if not more, and then the FF&E side, that'll take a little bit of time in that process. So the arc of that project doesn't put it forward or back of any of the other projects. It puts it right on schedule for a 2019 budget project going forward.
And if I might, Commissioner, items 1 through 7 were identified as critical by the board during that session in March. The 4-H pavilion and the sheriff's office facility both garnered 5 votes each, and then 10, 11, and 12 and 14 were declining based upon the number of votes that they received.
Yeah, but when you place the votes, you're placing them against a category and not the overall needs of the county.
That is true.
That was not discussed. It was just we had the 4-H arena in that category, and I think Cane Creek was in that category as well. So which one was the highest in that category? We never came back and ranked what's needed for the county, what's urgent for the county. And frankly, I see the sheriff, I see the 911 center, and I see Board of Elections are needs that the county has submitted going forth, you know, for the past year or two. And I don't know that this plan sets that urgency to accomplish what we need there. Now, my understanding is the needs of the sheriff is about a $10 million building. They own the land, they want to put it on their current footprint.
Well,
I think we need more information before, I can't make a decision with this little information. I'd need to see the.
specifically, what information are you looking for?
Well, I'm looking for, reference to the studies that were done, the architectural rendering, what the actual need of the building. I have no idea what size building to build for the sheriff. It's not been presented to us. The only thing that's I've been presented is the 4-H arena.
We did provide a rendering, my recollection was at your March meeting, of the footprint of the sheriff administration and how it would connect to the existing administration building. I can't recall off the top of my head if it identified a square footage, but the numbers that we have presented to you in this document are the numbers that were presented to us by the architect. I do understand that, yes, we were just finished a fairly significant square footage as it relates to our health and human services, but the construction market was much more friendly at that point in time than what we're seeing today as it relates to bids. And that's one of the things the consultant took into effect.
All I'm saying is that there's not sufficient information to make a good business decision for Union County provided to us.
Mr. Rushing?
With the sheriff's office facility, I mean, that's no jail space, right? That's no jail cells.
My understanding is that is all administrative offices and their staff.
You know, I just think back that we built the judicial center for 16, 17 million. And that's a huge building. The DSS, 30, what was the final figure of that?
It was 100, are you talking about
No,
construction
communications
cost, or I think the construction cost was around 26, for the actual contract was about 26 million, I believe.
That's a,
Not including land or,
and we already have the land for the sheriff's expansion, right?
yes, it would be built on the existing site.
I look at the library up at the top, which the library's already been voted on and approved, and it's mixed into this, and I know, I mean, I thought that's just done. I look at SBCC, and that's done. I get a lot of confusion when I see all these numbers in here, like they're ranked 15th and 20th, or 19th and 20th and 21st. We are gonna do those, right? I mean, we're not voting on whether or not to do these, or?
No, they are already included. However, in this year, you'll be appropriating those amounts into those projects. And if you'll look at the funding slide in item number 2, the 2016 GO bonds, that is the remainder of the voter-approved GO bonds that over those 3 years of the capital plan will be appropriated and ultimately spent down. And those are primarily attached to the library project and to the SBCC projects.
As far as the 4-H pavilion, I'm supportive of that project. I think we need to do it. It's been past time that we did it. But I'm looking at, I've also been asked that we support the whole thing and not do it a piece at a time. You know, what would happen if we did it at one time, and what would happen if we enclosed it? So somebody made a point the other day that maybe cheaper to enclose it than to have it open, and that may suit for the school graduations and some other things that can be done there. Why can we not talk about this after we do the budget? Why can this not be done after budget time?
Because one of the items that we're doing is we're committing a penny from operations to fund this plan. We are also committing bond savings to fund this plan. Those are two pretty integral parts of our budget development.
So what part of the plan are we committing the penny to? The whole thing, including the library and the SBCC, or are we committing?
Not for those that already have the 2016 GO bonds. You're committing it to the balance of the program, which includes items 1 through 14, as well as your renewal and replacement for community services, general government, jail replacement, as well as SPCC renewal and replacement.
And I still look back at this 911 that we have in the basement here, and I remember a bathroom, and I remember a break room, and I remember $700,000 coming from 911 funds, or close to that number, and I'm still trying to figure out why I would want to spend $1 million on a bathroom and a break room and whatever else that we're going to do down there.
We're taking part of the center, and I believe we showed a schematic of this at your March meeting. We're taking out the administrative space that is presently adjacent to the 911 center, moving that wall so that we can add additional consoles, and so that our supervisors can actually be supervisors versus acting as telecommunicators, and add the additional staff that has been appropriated. And we are moving the administrative offices over to what is presently a large conference room across the hall.
And then we're going to build another 911 center hopefully soon, or?
Well, the board did not include a new 911 center as part of your 6-year capital improvement plan when we presented it to you. So there are no monies allocated in this plan for a new center because you all did not rank that as a priority.
If we have money set aside in our balance, in our fund balance, during the year, can we not look at more need-by-need basis and do that at that time?
That is exactly how we have been operating for many, many years. Staff was directed to develop a 6-year capital improvement program and to develop a funding strategy that was sustainable, and that is what we have done.
Mr. Helps, yeah.
I had a relative with that is the marketing director of the company built our judicial center. And I went to him, now I admit it's been a year ago, and costs have changed. But to build a 911 center, with the size we need, they had one of their engineers give us a rough guesstimate of about $6 million. Now, that jumped to 8, fine. I have problems spending almost $2 million moving a couple offices around when we've got a need, because the need is because of the location of the 911 center to the rail yard, and the exposure that if we lose one of those tanks like the Murrah building, then we'll lose our 911 center completely along with part of this building. So, I mean, when you got a cost of less than $10 million and you've been build $2 million and not even consider it, I think this needs to go back to the drawing board. I will say that the 4-H pavilion, I agree with a 4-H pavilion, but don't build a half one. Build one like Cabarrus Arena that can be an economic generator instead of, nothing personal, Jerry, but you're looking at a smaller portion of the population that the current design addresses. When we can build a center that they can use, and we can use like a Coliseum here. So, you know, I would support that and do a bond, do a referendum to do that, to enclose it. It gives them a nicer facility, and it's something the entire county can use.
Well, I would just say with regard to the 4-H pavilion, one of the things that I worked really hard to do as a county extension director was to get a one-stop shop for agricultural services in this county. Agriculture's a huge industry in this county. We're third in the state in agricultural farm level income. So it makes a significant impact on the tax base and the balance of our tax income. At that time, one of my desires was to have the 4-H pavilion, as I called it, which was sort of general purpose building with an arena for our outstanding and long-standing 4-H horse program, along with some facilities to be the third largest ag county in the state of North Carolina. We had to put up a little white tent and borrow some panels from southern states to have a livestock show for our kids. When you go to other counties that have a tenth or a 20th of our agriculture, and they have livestock arenas that are certainly usable and acceptable. But we had to can that because the 4-H or the Ag Center got a little more expensive than we had planned on. So we said we'll wait on that. So that was 2006 when that was built. So that's been 11 years, 12 years. We have had innumerable meetings with various stakeholder groups. Everybody could possibly imagine. We've hired 2 consultants to provide us with information on the type of facility. And that has been presented through the Ag Advisory Board. I'm the liaison to that board, and so I brought this project forward because we felt we had a good handle on what the community, the agricultural community, who will be the primary users of that facility, wanted, as well as something that was certainly serviceable and usable. Now, when we first started looking at this, and I got lucky, I had a little bit of money left over, so I had the architect take a quick look at a footprint to see how big it would need to be. So we had, actually the company that built the Ag Center said, yeah, I'll take a look at that footprint right quick. So he guessed ballpark $2.5, $3 million back in 2006 that we could have built that facility that would have been serviceable. Certainly you can tell those costs have escalated, but there's been quite a bit of, I hesitate to say resistance, because the Ag Advisory Board voted, I think there's 12 members of that board, they voted unanimously in support of this on numerous occasions. But the resistance that always came through, and it's typical of a farmer, is, I don't know who you get to build that thing, but I can build it a whole lot cheaper. Well, what they don't realize is there's a lot of things that go into a government facility that don't for private enterprise. But what I did indicate to those folks was that, and it's always been my desire, is that, and I believe Commissioner Helms, you mentioned it, we have needs and we have wants. Some people would see this as a want. I tend to consider it, when you look at the education of our youth and hands-on experience, skill building, I see it more of as a need. But I did offer to that group that I wore 2 hats. One, I had a passion for the facility, being involved in agriculture all my life, but at the same time I had an obligation to the citizens of Union County as a and the taxpayers of Union County to try and be judicious with their funding. And so it was my, I hesitate to say promise, but explain to them that I would work towards this facility, provided I could work with staff and the county manager to do it with cash over time, and not put ourselves out on a limb. And I believe Commissioner Akmus raised the concern that we wanted to be certain that as we move forward that we had a facility that was utilized, and this first and second phase would certainly point us in that direction. So that's my feelings on the pavilion.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir.
And, I watched last year in the tent, like you were talking about, and, when the kids come in and come out, it would be a nice, addition, especially with the amount of money that we have in agriculture. And it was some folks off the agriculture committee that actually mentioned to me, let's do it right now, and let's get it done. So, these projects that we can do, only thing I have really, the 911 expansion, trying to spend $1 million just for a short-term fix down there. I just don't know if we need to do that. There's other things on here that we have to do and can do, pretty simple, you know, 270,000, 840,000, 268,000. You know, those monies are there. We have that money. You mentioned something the other day that gave me some concern is the 3.09 cent that we told people was going to be for SPCC, the library, and for schools. And that's what we told people, that we were going to use $10 million, we were going to fund $10 million from that same 3.09 cents. That gives me pause. That gives me concerns. I think I spoke to you about that. We need to reflect the true cost of that bond. If that's not the cost of the bond, then we need to reflect the true cost of the bond. When we're telling people something and we just decide that we're going to do something with it, whether it's Sheriff's Department or whatever, I'm still concerned again with the Sheriff's facility costing basically the cost of maybe a middle school, that we're going to build a Sheriff's facility that would, you know, be the same price as a middle school. I would like to know more about that. I'd like to know why. And I'd like to know if that space is needed. Is that a 50-year Sheriff's Department? What does that get us exactly for that much money? I mean, that's, I'd like to have the sheriff have some input on that and tell us. So we have no time on any of this, and we got to make a decision on all this tonight. I'm not ready either to make that decision. I'm supportive of the 4-H position. If we can get it all done and get it done nice now, I'd be supportive of that, even if we couldn't cut taxes as much as we were talking about cutting. But again, with the amount of money that we have that we didn't expect to have, we might can do a nicer job and just use the money that we don't expect to get this year like we didn't expect to get last year and the year before, and the year before. And that's where I'm at.
Question for the manager, is the critical need for you and your meeting on the 11th, the approval of this 6-year capital improvement plan, or committing the penny to in the debt service savings to these projects?
Those are two pretty important components to providing you all with a balanced budget as to how we're going to use those funds. If the board chose, we could discuss this on the 11th, but on the 11th, I have to have a pretty good idea from the board as to where we are in budget. We are bringing to you a budget with a $0.015 reduction as directed, and we are bringing you a capital improvement program committing a penny, which I believe Commissioner Akmus at the March meeting requested that we look into as to whether or not we could use existing operating funds as part of that overall strategy. So the budget development to this point has been based upon those assumptions.
And I would like to follow up on one comment Commissioner Rushing made. If you look in the funding strategy, there is about $5.5 million of fund balance usage, and that is based on our ongoing forecasts and projections to year end. So you mentioned money that we didn't think we were going to have and so forth. This incorporates, based on your direction as a board, to maximize our fund balance and to use as much as we can through different pieces. So this is a big chunk of that funding strategy. Also includes, we projected to year end, it's not a perfect projection, but it is a usage of that fund balance. So Commissioner Rushing, we did take into account that, that funding source as we put this plan together.
I think we've got a solid support for some of these projects, and I think that this board can make a good decision on those things. Again, the $25, $26, $7 million for the Sheriff's Department, I would like to hear the sheriff say, does he want a $27 million jail office expansion? Not even jail cells, just office expansion. And I mean, that's a lot of office space. And I've been over there and I've seen how they had to double up in some places, so I know they need something. But I mean, we're talking about something similar in size and scope to the Health and Human Services building. I mean, that's big project. And maybe, I don't know if that waits a year or something, maybe we can figure something out on it. But the other part is that I would like to see the projects that are already paid for and people are already being billed their tax bill for, move separate from all this other, because it does clutter up everything too. And let's go over these other projects, and just decide what we wanna do. Again, with the sheriff, that's the biggest chunk is that sheriff's department. And Jerry, and again, I've watched you work for this, I've seen you work this. I agree with you on this completely, that it's time to do something for the agriculture community in this county and the kids that have to endure the sitting in the tent while other kids. I've seen the facilities all over the state, and they're wonderful facilities, and I think it's time we do something with that. The question is do we do it now or do we do it piece by piece? I think there's some concern from the agriculture community that if it's done piece by piece, it might not ever get completed because they have been promised so long that this needs to be done. But that's kind of Friday, that's what I would like to see.
Mr. Helms?
Point of clarification, I agree with you, Jerry, on the 4-H. But however, I think we should, the facilities, and I remember seeing the facilities, the barns, the 2 riding rinks, one covered, one uncovered, if I remember correctly. I'd rather see that facility built, what I call right enclosed. And Commissioner Rushing referenced, I talked to a gentleman that builds these things, and he says having a open air roof requires so much more foundation that it almost negates the cost of enclosing it. And I could see this satisfying and exceeding the needs of the 4-H and the kids, but it could also be an economic generator for Union County if we completed it and did it right the first time. We could if we did a total package like Cabarrus Arena, and I hate to keep using that as an example, but it's utilized constantly. And to have that could be a huge economic generator for the county and still provide the needs for the 4-H and their people. And we have time to put it on a bond referendum, because year before last, you told us at the end of June we had to have it in because we had another discussion like this. So, you know, I'm not negative on the 4-H arena. My main thing is let's do it right the first time for a Union County facility that'll serve all the citizens.
And up to this point, in the direction from the board, a bond referendum hasn't been directed. So when we did the funding structure, the direction was maximize cash and create a sustainable plan. So if that's the parameters, then I think the board would need to give us that direction to build that structure out. Because you're right, end of June is probably the latest moment we can probably do it. But I think that would be then the direction that you would need to give us, because we need to get started planning on that.
Well, actually, our conversations before, you told us that we couldn't do it. Just a couple weeks ago, you said we couldn't do it. And so, couldn't do the bond. We didn't have time. And, it's, I think it's something we need to consider, and we can talk about it on the 11th. But, I think we need to have our priorities there. This board has always said it. Health and safety is the #1 thing. And our 911 and our sheriff's department is the key integral parts of that.
We will be happy to provide the board with your March 26th presentation that had a lot of the information that you all have identified. If it is the direction that we discuss this on the 11th, I would like to know specifically what else you would like for us to present so that a decision can be made.
Well, you said you had architectural information on the facilities that you were going to try to build. Can you provide us some of that?
What we have, and I think that was what was presented on the 26th of March. If you remember, you, as a board last year, funded the 4-H Pavilion study, So we do have a study related to that. And then there was a space needs analysis and study done for the sheriff's office and the 911 in reference to the size of the building in which the sheriff was heavily involved in, that yielded this project package. So
And you also did we also did a space analysis for the Board of Elections.
Mr. Rush?
How much money in cash did you say that we had the other night?
Can you clarify that for me?
How much money do we have? Okay, you said we needed to borrow 10 million to do the projects.
Right.
And so we have how much in cash that we could use, freed up to use for projects?
This project package uses about $5.5 million of fund balance out of the general fund. Right now, the working budget then has an additional $1 million of usage for one-time items probably in the general fund. So that drains your fund balance down to just above your 20% mark. So this
we
is
only have 5 million?
about 5.5 million. Of course, we won't know until the audit's complete, but we're projecting about 5.5 million of this piece is what's committed to this.
So we were gonna do $30 million in projects, give or take, and we were just gonna use, we're only gonna borrow 10 million, if I remember correctly.
right.
We're only gonna borrow 10 million. So
You're-
where's $15 million?
Well, it's a combination of sources. So the debt service savings is an ongoing pay-go source, and it starts off with $1.4 million and then works its way up over time and ebbs and flows based on your debt service. So that's line one. You have asset forfeiture funds of $500,000 that can only be used at the sheriff's firing range. You have the committed penny, which is a pay-go source out of the general fund, which is an ongoing sustainable funding source. Then you have the E911 funds, which is $700,000, and that'll pay for the equipment and some of the key components at the 911 center renovation. You have the $5.5 million of fund balance usage. You do have $1 million of pay-go next year, which would be above and beyond the committed sources of funding. You have interfund borrowing, which is really a cash flow management tool to make the project timing work. So that is a financing strategy with the ongoing funding sources. You have other debt funding than the 10 million, and then you have about 3.7, almost 3.8 million that would be made up primarily of savings from the human services building and a couple of other smaller projects that are completed or near completion, which we think will be free up money that's available. It's dribs and drabs. It's 100,000 here, a couple 100,000 there. Over as we clean up the CIP. This isn't the full project package of all the open projects. That's probably 60 or 70 projects in total. This is all the 2019 going forward projects. So that's how we kind of pieced this strategy together, because based on what you told us, you wanted a sustainable funding strategy, you wanted to maximize cash, and then you wanted to do all the the critical projects. So every project that you voted on is included in this financing plan. So nothing was put ahead or back or dropped off the list that you as a commission prioritized. And Commissioner Helms, you mentioned that you didn't get to prioritize them all as a big package. Well, in this case, that as a big package, we covered them all. So there's no projects that got dropped from the list at all. In fact, your critical projects are being funded first, and your public safety projects and your 5 votes essentially projects are in that first block in 2019 and 2020. But we maximized all the cash that's there, Commissioner Rushing.
So we commit a penny. In my mind, I'm seeing if we commit a penny, we basically used a penny and raised a penny. And that's not kind of what we were talking about the other night. The Sheriff's Department, again, I mean, if $6 million worth of offices will do it, or $10 million worth of offices will do it, maybe we use that and do the expansion at the Sheriff's Department in stages. Because we're not going to hire enough deputies to fill up a $27 million facility unless he's got them already, and they would be sitting on top of each other. I don't know if that's the case down there. I mean, if we're going to, we've been talking about cutting pennies or trying to cut taxes. I don't know that I see some cost savings that could be cut there. So again, yeah, if that's why I'd like to see some maybe discussion of more of what we do with the sheriff's department. So if we can do that Friday, that'd be great.
And I want to clarify, the penny committed here is not an additional penny. It's a penny being redirected out of operating. As Cindy mentioned, we have a penny and a half programmed right now in the general fund to reduce the revenue by. This is an additional penny on top of that we're redirecting to the capital program and the debt savings. That the net change is a penny 5, 1.5 cents directed into capital. That's not an increase anywhere. That's a redirect from operations.
And I
into
appreciate
the
that,
capital.
Jeff.
So I just want to be sure that
I
that's clear.
appreciate that, but we had a former county commissioner came in here the other night, talking about a penny and a half being a tax increase that made his taxes go up. So a lot of people don't understand that. So that penny and a half that you talk about, and I understand, you understand, we have people in the community that don't understand that. So that's what I'm trying to get to, is that when people see that, especially if we're taking it out of the money that was dedicated for SBCC, the library, the school bonds, and using that money to pay this back, I just think we need to be more transparent in that.
And that's not included in this. I just want to be real clear. The only way that's tied to this is through that 10 million. That committed penny is not from the debt rate.
No, the debt service savings that is in this plan are from bonds from many years ago, and some of the actions this board has taken over the last few years in which we have refinanced and retired some debt, which has provided those savings.
Also, I'd like to see a list, if we approve this bond, this package, a list of how they will be. More, you say it's already there, saying how it's gonna be funded and which is gonna be your first priorities, and go through that. I'd like to see that in a little more detail on Friday.
Commissioner Akins?
So, let me understand, when could we do a bond on these items? 'Cause I think what I've heard tonight is there's obviously some interest in maybe putting some of this out to GO bond versus us making that decision, is that right? What's the date in which we could put that on a bond referendum?
Your bond referendums have to occur when there's countywide elections. So in Union County, the countywide elections are on commissioner election years. So this primary tomorrow would have been an option. The election in November will be an option. And then the next opportunity will be then in 2020 in that same time frame. So whatever, that's a presidential year. So whatever that primary will be a countywide election. And then that fall, there will be a countywide election. So those are your essentially your next 3 opportunities in the next 3 years to get that done.
So, I guess I'm a little concerned. What information do you have as staff that you're going to be able to provide on Friday that's going to answer all of these questions and make us all feel comfortable? Is there additional information that has not been shared?
In your March 26th meeting, we did provide information from every one of the studies that had been done, which included 911, it included the 4-H pavilion, the sheriff's office facility, and the Board of Elections renovations. So that information, we identified the footprint, we identified what the study had recommended as it related to square footage, construction costs, etc. We can provide you more information out of those studies. I'm not sure, because some of those studies are fairly significant. We could provide you maybe the executive summary out of those studies, which in the sheriff's office, they identify some real critical needs as it relates to evidence storage, and some issues like that as it relates to why they believe this project should move forward. We can present that information. I'm at somewhat of a loss of what additional information we have as staff that we may not have already provided to you that will answer the questions.
All right, thank you. And my next question is, if we were to put some of these items on a GO bond, how would that impact the time frame in which these items are funded?
Well, obviously, until you have the results of that GEO bond, the earliest at this point, which would be November of 2018, and we have not had any discussions with the Board of Election as to what they need and when they need it by to do that. So until that election is held, the voters speak as it relates to whether that is a vote up or a vote down. And then we have to assemble. We have to go through our rating agencies. It would probably delay them potentially up to a year.
Probably about a year, if I had to guess.
So this proposal or plan commits a penny of the general fund or the operating fund. Is that right? And we've already directed staff to implement, and I believe you indicated earlier tonight that you had implemented a 1.5 cent tax cut.
As part of the budget that we are going to,
That you're going to be proposing.
yes.
Well, given what I've heard tonight, and bear with me here as I try to work through this, and I'm kind of the opinion, and I think I'll put this in the form of a motion, that perhaps we don't fund this capital plan. That instead, what I've heard tonight is there's a desire to have these capital improvement plans approved by the voters. I don't necessarily disagree with that. To Commissioner Helms' point and Commissioner Rushing's point, I think it does give you an opportunity to complete a project versus doing it in phases. Now, I know Commissioner Simpson has been of the opinion that we pay for it all at once out of cash, or we build it as we go. I think if we're going to go to the voters, they need to decide and know the facts of what you're looking at so that they can make an educated decision. So what I would recommend is that if we already have a 1.5 cents cut and you got a penny here, why don't we do a 2.5 cent tax cut? Put these items on a GO bond, go forward, and use the remaining 0.5 cent that we've already identified here to fund the renewal and replacement, which I think we talked about in the meeting in March, as well as those first 7 items. As well, use the money that we discussed tonight for the Board of Elections to study their storage needs and address their space issues. My understanding, unless I'm wrong, these projects can be funded through the use of fund balance, I think you said 911 funds, and debt service savings. Is that right?
I believe that'd be the case.
So, with the remaining projects that this board voted on and approved back on March 26th, exclusive of those first 7, let's put them on a GO bond or find other debt financing measures, you know, because obviously some of these items are $280,000, $270,000. You're not going to put those on a GO bond, but there are other measures in which you could fund those, depending, of course, on the scope and the cost of the project. But to me, that gives staff the direction that they need. It puts these, what I view as very critical and expensive decisions, in the hands of the taxpayer. And I would certainly think that my colleagues would agree that a 2.5 cent decrease in the tax rate would provide real savings to every citizen in this county as well give them the final say on these large capital projects.
Mr. Rush?
I agree with everything you said. I think that that's an outstanding idea. I think that gives us some more time to check into the actual cost of the sheriff's facility. That gives us some more time to investigate the 4-H pavilion and see what we need to do there. And if a penny and a half will take care of $54 million bond that the school did and $50 million we did, then if the voters decide that that's what they want to go to, that gets to the question that I had about 3.09 cents. If we're going to ask them to absorb some of this to be absorbed into that, then I think the voters need to approve that as well. So, yeah, I'm in complete agreement with that. I think that's a great idea.
Mr. Hill?
Commissioner Akins, clarification, please. You keep referencing the 1 through 7. What I'd like to understand better is I agree with your concept, and I think voters deserve a right to do it. Plus, we can get some things done and get them finished. But in your motion, are you pre-approving what particular processes are you approving?
I'm not necessarily approving any. What I'm saying is that let's use, instead of taking the full 1.5 cents,
Yep.
let's take 1 cent,
Okay.
apply it with the 1.5 we already agreed that we're going to cut, and fund those first 7 items that we identified as critical, which would be the Southwest Regional Library, to finish that since it was
That's
voter
already been
approved.
done. That means we don't
Well,
need
we
to vote
still-
on that.
I believe we do.
No, the bond, I thought the
It's
bond
not,
did that.
it's been approved by the voters, it's not been appropriated.
Right, so it's
Right,
still
that's why it's on.
figured into these calculations
But you're
though.
taxing it
Right,
already.
Right, it's included in the 2016 GOs.
So it's already, that's technically the ones that were in that bond with SPCC and schools, they don't have any relevance to this list, other than their activities we can be doing.
Right, they're funded through the 2016 GO bonds. So the SBCC projects for the classroom building, the library, and renovations to A and B are funded through GO. So those don't have any impact. Our new debt, they already have voted debt and have committed tax rate to them. So they
Right,
don't
but
change
we-
your funding mechanism at all.
right, but we would still have to identify that as something that we're going to do, since it's been approved, unless we're going to renege on what the voters approved and not go through
That's
with
probably a
it.
true statement.
Is that what we're gonna do?
No, but it's, if we have to give the final approval. Now, I assume that any plan that we approve in 6 years, a lot can change in 6 years. That it'll have to come back to this board to be approved before you actually take action, get started on it.
Well, yeah, I think whatever goes
that
on the
fair?
bond, yeah,
Or
would,
bond, or
right.
what we have on the
or any other
capital
source,
plan,
sure. Yeah, it would have to be approved by this board.
Mr. Rush?
This training, the public safety training facility, that money comes from another source. You said it comes from it was $500,000 that goes to that source.
Only 500,000 of it comes from asset forfeiture funds, which have to be spent on training and training facilities
Is
for
that
the
an
sheriff's office.
ongoing source, or is that one time?
It builds up over time, and what that is a result of is when the sheriff makes arrests or drug busts, the county gets to share in the benefit of those from the seized assets. So it's an ebb and flow based on the number of busts, based on the value, and those kinds of things. So
Is
the
that
sheriff has
500,000
500,000 in there right now is what he's committed to that.
Is it so $100,000 a year, $50,000 a year?
It just varies based on, hopefully it's nothing, because we prefer to see the sheriff not
Right.
have to do
Okay.
that, but it just ebbs and flows, it just depends.
So you've got we've got 5 million, a little over 5 million that we can spend. These smaller projects, do they get the public safety radio replacement, radio towers in Southwest Union, microwave replacement, historic courthouse, Cane Creek Camp Store, Cane Creek recreational facility, all those, where do we get with those? Is that around the $5-6 million that we have?
If you were to take this program and you looked at doing those critical projects, because we've looked at the critical projects in standalone fashion, you could fund them with that debt service savings pay-go number and some of those other sources. We'd have to restructure the plan a little bit. But if you take out the sheriff's facility and you take out
for lack of a better word, those GEO projects that you're referring to, Commissioner Akmus, then this plan becomes, it looks very similar to what you've had in the past, but we can work that into a cash flow. So the cash flow will have to change a little bit, but we can certainly do it. I think you can fit it within that structure. So I feel I'm comfortable that you can fit those, particularly those emergency or the public safety projects.
You put that in motion already?
I did.
We have a motion. Any discussion?
Can you repeat it, please, sir?
Sure.
Sorry.
So, let's not approve the 6-year plan. Instead, and let me go back to my notes here that I've scribbled down. You recommend that we use the penny or the penny and a half that we're allocating to capital programs, and together with the 1.5 cent already recommended by this board, offer a 2.5 cent tax cut. Use the remaining 0.5 cent to fund the items that the board identified as critical in our March meeting, which were those first 7 items, if I'm not mistaken. Then use the remaining 0.5 cent to fund the items, as well as to fund the renewal and replacement, which was,
It's community services, general government, jail replacement, and SBCC.
right, which was a total of
It's about 670.
600 and some thousand. Fund those items. Additionally, include funding for the Board of Election to study their storage needs and address their space issues that the manager discussed this evening. And then, as I mentioned, fund those through use of fund balance, 911 funds, and debt service savings. That was my motion.
And we are still gonna be discussing the budget, so.
Oh, yes, sir.
Yeah, cause he said, okay, there's other items on the budget to discuss besides the 2 point, yeah. That's right, because we're gonna be discussing.
As long as you understand.
Yeah, I got you.
Any further discussion?
Can you,
Don't make him
I
repeat.
apologize, I'm not gonna make you repeat it. But will you identify the major plans that would be, you would consider the GEO bondable, like, sheriff's office?
I
Pavilion?
would be hesitant to do that until we can figure out exactly what the GEO bond would look like
Yeah.
and see what funding mechanisms we have to fund some of these other, because my initial thought is we may be able to package some of these into a larger bond. And so I don't want to specify one over the other at this point, but I think we would have time to formulate a plan for that.
I guess I was interested to understand which ones were not included in your motion.
The only thing that I'm saying that we fund are the 7 that we identified as critical.
The first 7, you're saying?
Correct.
Okay.
The rest would be just as we currently
Consideration for the
do,
others.
consideration for
Okay. All right.
other funding sources, including
With
GEO bonds.
Exception of the R&R, right?
Correct.
And the
The
Board of
R&R
Elections.
The R&R, the Board of Elections, and those first 7 items are what we would be funding in my motion. The others would be for future consideration.
Okay. I thought the manager said that she had presented to us a space study from Board of Elections.
It was as part of your March 26th meeting. We did provide you. Their issue is that the assumption was, and I think some of you may have had discussions with members of the Board of Elections, offsite storage. There has been some concern expressed by them as to offsite storage. So the initial $100,000 is to evaluate their storage needs and how they can be met. The $1.5 million is to go in and really gut their existing space and reconfigure it based upon their discussions with the space consultant that was retained and provided a report.
That building is considered ours, that we can go in and.
Yes, sir.
renovate and do whatever.
Yes, sir.
Before we vote, Madam Manager, does that give you sufficient direction?
Yes,
for
sir.
Friday?
Yes, sir, it does.
I would just, I'm gonna support your motion, Commissioner Akins. I just say a couple things. One, is we have an election tomorrow. We're gonna be electing some new commissioners, or maybe some of the same, but, I get concerned that, voters elect us with the responsibility to, sit here and go through the detail and analyze the data and get direction from staff and move forward. And so I get concerned that we can't make a decision about a need with regard to a sheriff's office or a 911 center, and we have to go back and ask the voters every time. Now that, I certainly know the spirit of Commissioner Akins' motion, and again, I'll support it. The other thing I would say is, for instance, and I'm not to beat a dead horse, but the 4-H pavilion. We spent a lot of time, we spent a lot of effort with stakeholders. We hired 2 consultants. One didn't do a very good job, so we hired a little more professional consultant, and I think we have a good product. And I appreciate Commissioner Helms' comments, but I would say that something along the line of what he is describing is outside the scope of the project that was delivered to the board. So I think when we talk about what's going to be on that GO bond, there may be some that we have to go back and readdress as to actually what we're actually looking, or what we're actually going to present to the voters. So enough talk. All in favor of the motion, say aye. Aye. And that takes us to I believe, I know we have a closed session. I would like to ask Jeff one question. Can we, and this is with the pleasure of the board, can we suspend the rules and add an item back to the agenda to discuss? We can. I would like to add that item 5 back. We moved quickly approving the agenda there. That was the issue. We had no objections. We had no one speak, and it was the one going from 15 to 20,000 square feet. Does the board need more study on that, or?
Good.
Okay. Then I would like to suspend the rules and add that. And I believe somewhere along number 5 it says,
Motion to approve conditional rezoning petition CZ 2018-00001 Rayfield to modify and approve conditions of CZ 2017-002 containing 8.55 acres being on tax map 06201-007A located 9925 Ray Road and being within the Sandy Ridge, and adopt the consistency statement for approval consistent within the comprehensive plan.
is that sufficient? Yeah. We have a motion. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. Thank you for that. I know they'll appreciate it. And do we want to have our comments before we motion to go into closed session?
I have no comments. That makes it easier.
I have no comments.
I do have a comment. Jeff Caton, I owe you an apology. We had a speaker tonight in our informal comments that asked some questions about an email that you had sent. And actually, that was probably my fault. I heard the town of Indian Trail had cut the funding for the program, and I asked Jeff to find out if Monroe had also done the same thing. There was some concerns of whether or not the organization had enough money to put their half down payment. And at that time, I offered a $100 donation, and I will be following up with that $100 donation to the Artists Musicians Guild and their program. I will be sending out, I think Mayor Alvarez is part of that program. I'll be sending him a check for $100. But that is my fault, Ms. Manager. I asked him to find out about the funding because we were concerned as another organization wanted to rent that space for that same time, if it was going to be done or not. So that answers Mr. Cook's issues, I think.
Well,
My apologies to you. Mr. Caton.
And if I might be granted a
Sure.
small.
Sure.
The board directed staff to provide similar services to Mr. Cook for 2018, which we have done. The issue before you this evening was 2019, and there was no direction by this board to do anything other than follow our policies for any reservations for 2019. So just for clarification purposes.
Mr. Helms?
No. No comments.
No comments from me, except tomorrow's election day. If you haven't already, please do. And at this time, I will move that the board go into closed session for the following purposes: to consult with an attorney in order to preserve the attorney-client privilege and to consider and give instructions concerning the handling of the following judicial actions: Stanley County versus Union County and Town of Norwood, Stanley County petitioner versus North Carolina Environmental Management Commission et al. And respondents, Montgomery County et al. Versus North Carolina Environmental Management Commission et al. And respondents, Yadkin Riverkeeper petitioner versus North Carolina Department of Environmental Quality et al. And respondents. All those in favor of the motion say aye. Aye. Opposed, none. Thank you.